From walking into a workshop, to lifting up that pencil, to having the courage to make the first mark, to draw that first image, to share that story, to work with people to animate that story into the performance of your life. And then see that performance played back to you so that you really feel it, you really experience it, and learn from it once again.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot out in the moment around the migrant community and around what's kind of going on at an international level. There's a lot of headlines, there's a lot of trauma, there are very powerful images that we're seeing about refugees and war. And we wanted to make something different. We really wanted to focus on these kind of big journeys, little journeys. We wanted to create a different feel to it that wasn't about headlines, but was about the real human experience over a course of time. And we wanted to find a way to present back the story, back to the people, to the storyteller.
We tried to find a way to see if we could make a film that would act as a platform for some of our storytellers to share their story in such a way that the wider world could connect with it at a human level. Image making was the key to unlocking people's ability to express their story. It was purely their authentic voice of their experience.
We kind of gave them a creative playground with lots of different tools and materials to be able to explore. And the four storytellers that ended up kind of being part of this documentary, they were incredibly generous in bringing all of their story and all of the feelings, and they didn't polish their stories to make them appear in a certain way. They didn't give us an ideal love story. They didn't give us a story of heroics. I think what I loved about our storytellers is that they really humbly brought all of the kind of conflicts and the experiences that they were going through. And I think that's what, for me, makes it very relatable too, and means that they really resonate to people, because being human is certainly not about being perfect. We ran workshops with our storytellers, and this was to really give them a space to explore telling their stories in different ways. I think it's very important at this point to distinguish between the kind of art making, because what we're looking for is spontaneous image making, because that's where the raw energy, the raw feelings, the emotions, where a lot of the charge is in that. Because once people start to think, they start to censor. And we really wanted to get the uncensored material for the story. That's where the power is, that's where the strength is. And so they made very powerful images using different materials about a moving part of their story. And once they had made and connected in with some of the emotion, some of the parts of their story, we invited them to make a performance, a very short performance, and to bring to life, to animate one part of their story using the materials.
So with the storytellers' artwork, with their images, their symbols, their objects, the textures, we needed to find a way to represent this back to them so that they really saw it, so that they were a witness of their own experience. So working with a team of puppeteers who took the artwork and transformed it into a story, an animation, holding true to the story as much as possible, working so closely with the imagery, the symbology and the art of the storytellers, and breathing life into it through the animation so that we could represent back their story to them.
And this was a process that took time, of going backwards and forwards, because they would be developing the puppets, and that's where the real technical crafting came into the process, where the puppeteers needed to make everything that was going to be played back to the storytellers, be that the set, the landscape, the puppets or other characters in the story, the boat, the sea.
The storyteller Vetri, who, when he was making images initially, he discovers a piece of green felt and it triggered a memory for him. It helped him to remember his mother tying his suitcase with green thread. And that became a potent symbol to him.
So the green string that his parents so carefully wrapped his bag to make sure, his suitcase to make sure that everything that he needed to come here, food, clothing, all of that would stay safe. And the rest of it, when he arrives here, he cuts it off really quickly because he doesn't want to be seen. He's embarrassed about it and he kind of gets rid of it. And yet through his journey of discovery and having to fall down, have to rebuild himself, his relationship changes, the meaning changes, so that suddenly he realizes that the green string is love.
Vetri was a man who went out in search of greatness, but what he discovered was his goodness. And that green thread was a powerful symbol of that.
Oh yes, I will never ever forget that. I'm missing this now. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And so for Sahura, you know, she's 2 years old, and then her family leaves Somalia. They leave the two brothers behind with family to seek asylum in another country, with the idea that the brothers will come and join her later. But war breaks out before that can happen, and so they're separated and they lose contact.
So Sahur lost contact with her homeland. She lost contact with half her family members. And then the other part of her story is reconnection.
And it was fascinating when Sahur was making her image. She was talking about a land that she had been forced to leave it to. So it's a land that she doesn't remember. She can only remember it through the stories she's told from her mother, her parents, her family. And it's only when she goes back as an adult that she knows what they're talking about. But already she knows that this land has red earth. And then when she goes back to Somalia, the red earth is the one thing that really stands out to her. That becomes the symbol of home, this home that she had to leave, this home that she didn't remember, and this separation that happened to them as a family. And then going back and reconnecting with home, with what that meant to her.
And when she went up and met with the puppet, with herself as a puppet, she was compelled to touch the red earth. She had to touch it. And that's when our experience becomes an embodied experience, when we connect with the stories through our feelings, not just through our thinking, but with our feeling.
It's so cool. That's so cool.
And it's amazing Wakas's story, because he's 17, he's young, he's not even officially an adult, and he goes off to seek this fortune. He wants to support his aging father who's labouring in Libya, and he's very aware that his father is getting old and that he needs to go and bring something back to support his family, that now he has to become a man. he has to start to take responsibility. And so he goes on this journey, on this boat journey, and it's terrifying. You know, the compass breaks, their food and water run out, and so they're forced into the unpredictable, the unknown. They don't know whether they're going to survive. They don't know whether they're going to find land or not. And I think what's so interesting about Wakas is that they were the youngest people on the boat, and the role that they played in looking after the older people on the boat. So connecting in with their faith, but also supporting and helping the other people, because the other people were in despair. They were losing hope, so much so that some of the older people were thinking about jumping ship. And that's so relevant in those moments where people, when they're out of control, when the situation is out of control, the only control that they have left is to take some kind of decision. That people are actually thinking, rather than be stuck on this boat and not know, I'm going to jump into the sea.
And in that darkness, in the abyss, in that moment of hopelessness, there's hope. There's a turning point in the journey, driven by his faith, driven by his sense of duty, driven by his humility and compassion for other people, to bring hope not just to himself, but to everybody else in the boat. Manuela's is a story of love. It's a story of a young woman who lived in her known world, but who felt somehow restricted within it, who felt there was more, had a sense that there was something more, but didn't know what that was. Until one day she brushed shoulders with a young man, a musician, who whispered in her ear. And then her journey began.
She meets this man, and they have this whirlwind love affair, and yet so much of it happens when they're not present. They're not together because they live in two different places, and how they fall in love through letters. That actually, even though they're not spending physical time together, that in the time apart, they have this experience of relationship.
And in Manuela's story, once again, there is the sacrifice, the ordeal of having to give something up in order to receive something else. In Manuela's case, it's letting go of her relationship with her mother in the form it was, to break contact with her mother, and in order to live a new life. And we see that across all the stories, the sacrifice that everyone had to make. And that relates so deeply, once again, to the human condition.
Hello. Well, thank you, really.
Thank you so much for coming.
Inviting our storytellers to come and sit in the theatre and watch back a moving moment being played back to them, and to have that experience, and for them to suddenly connect with their story in a different way, to connect with themselves in a different way, and to really experience the learning that they had on that journey inside and out.